silent. Don't leave me hanging, oh my God. Yes, so my name is Nathalie Nahai, and I am a web psychologist. It sounds like the beginning of some kind of AA meeting. Anyway, today I'm going to be talking about psychology of persuasive content for boring industries. And I kind of thought, well, as any good psychologist should, one should define the term before launching in. So I thought, well, what are boring industries? So I kind of thought, well, banking. Anyone here in banking? I think sorry. I'm really sorry. You guys do great work. Or at least you will after this talk. You can thank me later. Insurance is really boring. And I just figured plumbing. No one likes shit. So I thought I would start with these three. And today's talk, I'm going to look at persuasive copy. We're then going to dive into engaging images and then viral videos. Does that sound all right to you? Yeah? Yeah? All right. Okay. So we're ending with the videos because you've had a really long 3 days, and if you had the kind of night I had last night, you're probably really hungover. So, sorry, the whiskey was really quite nice. So let's start with persuasive copy. So in the UK, I do a lot of work with marketers, and I write for Marketing Week, and you often hear this term bandied around, the golden ratio. 80-20, where people say, okay, if you're going to get people to read what you're writing, you have to make sure that the headline is hooky enough. So we're going to spend 80% of our time on the headline and then 20% on the rest. Doesn't sound like a great idea to me, but this is received wisdom. We're going to come back to this. Ultimately, if you want people to read your copy, you want to make sure that you have something that makes you want to read on. So whatever industry you're in, whether it's boring or not, to get people to read, you need a hook. So I thought I would create 9 steps that I actually take for the kind of copy that I write to creating persuasive headlines and the copy that supports them, although it should be the other way around. So we'll start with number 1, understand your target audience. Now, if you're a psychologist, and even if you're not, if you're trying to relate with people, you have to understand their psychological context. And in terms of understanding these layers, I like to think of it in terms of 3 main key spheres, if you like. You have the universal psychological context, and that is things like social validation. So we're all here, we all want to feel admired and liked by our peers and our families. It's why the like button is so persuasive. We feel validated and liked, or the retweet button. So social validation is one key universal principle. Another would be the need to feel like we belong, which is why communities like this are so amazing. So those are universal psychological contexts. The second layer is cultural. And this can be anything from looking at the US, which is vast, and then bringing it down a little bit and going, okay, what's the cultural typography, if you like, of a city versus another, like Seattle? And then you go in further and you say, what about an organization? What about a team? And you start to get a sense of what motivates people to do what they do. The third and final layer, which I found particularly exciting, is around individual differences. And this is things like personality, neurochemical differences between one person and the next. Personality matters when you're creating persuasive content. Why? Because research has shown that adapting persuasive messages to personality traits to those of your audience can be an effective way of increasing that message's impact. So I have curated really, a list of 3 of the big 5 traits and the different words that we use if we score highly in these traits. So extroverts, those of you who are sitting towards the front of the stage, will tend to score more highly for extraversion. You are more likely, when you're speaking about yourself, to say things like, feeling strong, I'm outgoing, I like to be active, I like excitement and attention, thrill-seeking, novelty, all of these different components you'll find are the hallmarks of people who score highly in extraversion. So if your audience is fairly extroverted, and I'm going to give you some tools that you can use to find out if they are or not, if your audience is extroverted, you may find that this is a really quick route to engaging with them at a very deep level. Another trait, openness, your openness to experience. Apparently, I read about this last year. I had a really interesting conversation about it last night. Mushrooms, magic mushrooms. I don't know if they're legal. They're not here yet, but okay, so we're working on it. You've got the weed thing down. It's only a matter of time, people. So psilocybin, the active compound in magic mushrooms, if you take some, and I'm not advocating that you do, although I hear it can be quite fun. If you take some, it can increase your openness levels for up to about a year. Also, interestingly, totally different thing. The French eat a lot of raw meat, and there's this little parasite called Toxoplasma gondii that will increase your extraversion levels over the course of your lifetime. So anyway, these things can change. If you are open or doing lots of mushrooms, you are likely to use these words to describe yourself. So things like innovation, intelligence, sophistication, imagination, creative, and creativity, all of these sorts of words. If you are emotionally a bit more vulnerable and you score higher for neuroticism, and we all score everywhere on some of the spectrum of these particular traits, then you're more likely to respond to these sorts of words. So things like uncertainty, security, protection, safe. If you're trying to sell someone something and they're in the neurotic camp, then saying that you can reduce the anxiety or reduce their fear is a really persuasive technique to use. And there's some research that's come out from Cambridge that's it's actually not yet been published, that did this for retargeting ads with Google, and they found it to be a very effective way to segment and engage specific audiences. So these are some tools if you're interested in actually applying some of this stuff. The big 5 is the academic version that will enable you to have a look at and assess your audiences. This is the small version which you can get online, the iPip Neo. If you're interested in doing something a little bit less academically off-putting, you can try out Visual DNA. They have some amazing tools. They're a company based in the UK who are redefining data sharing and psychographic stuff. They have the biggest psychographic database in the whole world, so it's worth checking out. And finally, mypersonality.org. They're based out of Cambridge University, and they do some really interesting consensual psychographic profiling of Facebook users, but it's all with informed consent, because you all know what happened recently when they didn't do that. Okay, second step, write to one person. You should give each segment, especially when you're looking at personas, a psychologically representative persona, so building on the previous point. This means looking at their age and their gender, of course, but also their personality traits and their culture, which can be their country, their peer group, and also motivation, so whether they're getting motivated to engage with you intrinsically, so is this going to help me become a better person, to grow, to develop, or extrinsically, am I going to get a fast car, or a better job, or beat other people to the promotion? Third one, always starts with your copy. Always start with it. Write the outline of your copy first and then the headline, otherwise it won't work. And the reason for this is you have to have mental consistency between the headline that you've written and the body of the work. And it will ensure that you distill your content into a headline that can deliver. Psychological trigger words, this is my favorite. All of these words that you see up here, you will notice in news articles and headlines throughout the ages, throughout the world. So things like weird, bizarre, strange, mystery, effortless, painstaking, all of them, my favorite being the brackets, it's not what you think. So if I said to you, 3 amazing ways to increase your fertility at MozCon, brackets, it's not what you think. Yeah, okay, well, I don't even know what you thought. It kind of it takes you down a journey where you start to want to fill in the blanks, and so you want to know what's going to happen next, so you're going to click. Okay, you should always test several different headlines, but the interesting thing is that you should read them aloud. Why? Because when we read, we process our thinking differently than when we speak. And actually, research found that if you're writing your thoughts, you'll think and express yourself in a different way to than if you're typing. So there's all sorts of different ways. So it'll give you a new perspective. Pick the number 1 benefit. You have to make it really tangible and include it in the headlines. This is a great example. Harvard Business Review's proven ways to earn your employees' trust. It's proven, scientific, we all love a bit of this, and it tells you what it's going to give you. Of course, you should always include the product and problem in the headlines. This should be really basic. However, what you often don't find is that people have a really keen understanding of what that problem is. And we saw this yesterday, and I was utterly delighted. I actually use Optimizely, they're amazing. And what they've shown with this is a really extraordinary insight into the problem that people find with platforms. They're not saying they're the best platform. They're not saying they're the cheapest platform. They're saying that you'll actually use their platform. I've used a lot of platforms and then just not used them. So when I read this, I was like, yes, I shall use it. And actually, I do. Oh, other thing also, just if you're in web design, permissive language to get people to convert in a call to action, to sign up to trials, use language like test or try. It's much more persuasive than sign up or subscribe. Okay, totally left field headline. Oh, I go to a lot of conferences, and I don't really check my LinkedIn that much, and I recently got this email from this guy. It says, "I'm going to hunt you till you accept our LinkedIn connection." I was like, great, I'm going to call the police. And then smiley face. Sounds scary, doesn't it? Well, yes, it bloody well does. You shouldn't have sent me that message. So he sent me this thing. It stayed in my inbox for about 5 days, mainly because A, I was really quite impressed that he bothered to do something like this, and B, it was just that that's where he decided to go with it. Not like, bizarre ways. It was just, I'm going to hunt you. So anyway. But the point was that it got my attention, and that you can do things like that are a little bit left field that will get people's attention. Okay, always split test your headlines. It doesn't matter how small your readership is, you've got to be able to test what people respond to, whether it's emails and articles or web pages, and there's obviously various ways you can do this. Right, now to the juicy bit. Before I jump in with this formula, I'm going to preface this by saying that headlines and headline structures are always subject to trends. So we saw recently, a few years ago, when BuzzFeed came on the scene, and suddenly we had these epically long headlines that people would read. Before that, it was a question of how do we write a small headline that's going to be persuasive, that people will want, and next will probably be something different. However, I've found that if you use this formula, even elements of it, and you have the content to back it up, and that bit's crucial, then it has a very high success rate. So you want a number or a trigger word, an adjective, a keyword, and a promise. This sounds like countdown. An adjective, please. And then, sorry, British joke. A killer headline will ensue. So what does this actually look like? How does this work? So for instance, if I said, okay, I want to have a subject around frying eggs. Does anyone like eggs? I like eggs, I guess, right? Eggs Florentine. But no one's really excited about eggs. You could write an article that says how to fry an egg, or why I love frying eggs, or you could apply the formula. 13 unbelievable ways you can fry a small egg with a sock. And suddenly you start getting these weird mental images. You might hate eggs, but you'd be like, oh, that sounds a bit odd. That sounds quite intriguing. You've got the number, you've got your trigger word, you've got the adjective, the keyword, and the promise. And there you have it. Something that is going to be a lot more interesting to click on than the one previously. So for boring industries, I've chosen home insurance, because everyone finds it really boring, myself included. You could write an article that says why you should insure your home. This is very standard. There's a lot of adverts out there like this. Or home insurance for the whole family, yay. Or you could do this. 3 bizarre ways our bespoke insurance could save your life. Now, obviously, you want to make sure that your legal team have made sure that this is kosher for you to write, but it does make it a little bit more compelling. So you've got your number, your trigger, adjective, keyword, promise. So I hear you ask, isn't this just clickbait? I would argue that it's only clickbait if you're not offering value, if you're just driving traffic and then they land and there's nothing there. So you have to be able to deliver what you've promised. This is one of my favorite examples of how not to do it. So I really like Upworthy, and I get a few breaks in the day, and I thought, brilliant, I shall check this out. I quite like the Dalai Lama as well. He's kind of quite cute, in a sort of wise way, Buddhist wise way. And so it says the Dalai Lama has some very wise and uplifting words about farting. So I was thinking, brilliant, this sounds utterly ridiculous. I'll read that. So I go onto the thing. It's like 11 minutes long, which is an eternity when you're trying to get a paper that you're writing out. So I sit and I watch it, and it's basically 10 minutes of just him talking about wisdom, which is fine ordinarily, but not when I just want a bit of distraction and a dopamine hit. And at the end, he just basically says, yeah, I fart on planes like everyone else. That's not wise, that's not funny, it was just an admission that all of us knew anyway. And the point I'm making here is that if you are going to write something like that, that is exciting, and then you go through and you realize that it's a bit shit, rubbish, then you're going to get to the point where you're getting your trust in the quality of that content eroded. And if you have enough of these small erosions, you just will stop going back. So you have to make sure that you can deliver. And the reason that you would do this obviously speaks for itself, but you can do it by asking yourself what the tangible benefits would be for your customers to get from this content, which is why things like this work. Here, that's not just the number, they've also created an identity level trigger. So 10 things only exceptional bosses give employees. Obviously, we're not the target audience unless we run our own companies, but we all would like to think of ourselves as exceptional. So you click through, you read down, nice big Barnum catch-all phrase, good bosses make smart decisions and get important things done. Don't most of us think that we make smart decisions and we get important things done? Yes, so you're initiating a consistency principle yes set. So you go, yes, I do that, and then you read, the great ones do so much more. thinking, oh, God, what's there more to do? I want to be great, so I better do some more. So they're inviting you to click on. And then you can see that actually it's quite efficient. Another 177,253 people have that same impulse. Let's move on to images. So, one of the issues that we face with long-form content and other such things is that we're very easily distracted by images. Why? Because principally when we're growing up, that's the first thing that we learn to understand our environment with. So they're instant, they're data-rich, they're visually compelling, and they take up most of our attention when we first land on a piece of content. If you want your images to be more engaging, you have to elicit emotion. These are your classic 6. The one that doesn't get used very much but is often the most powerful is disgust. The reason that you can do some interesting stuff with this is because you often end up with memes pairing images with text that are not necessarily congruent. So there's dissonance between the emotional content of the image and the emotional content of the words, such as this. Oh no, wait, that's coming next. Oh, I threw in an extra bit of info. So where thought conflicts with emotion, the latter, emotion, is designed by the neural circuitry in the brain to win. So if you're reading something and it's provocative and it's emotional, whatever other decision-making process you have that you believe to be rational will get superseded by the emotional content. So things like this. This is first world problems, guy looking very depressed. Underneath it says, a swan just spat in our salsa. Obviously, you wouldn't be that upset if a swan spat in your salsa. And anyway, what do you do eating salsa next to swans? I don't know where he lives, maybe Queen's back garden or something. Okay, another one. So, had to wake up for the ironing lady to come and collect our clothes, and she still isn't here. It's really not that big of a deal, but it's the dissonance that creates the tension. This one, Boromir, one does not simply pull the flush at 4 a.m. and these other things. You know, it's kind of sweet. But this is why they work. The other thing you have to do is tell a story, especially if you're trying to sell something that people just don't identify with emotionally. And to do this, you have to ditch all the abstract terms and make your story contrasting and concrete. Great example. The Washington Post earlier this year created a new website called No More, and they decided with this website to go the visual route. So you can see with the images, you've got 6 images of the Pope with a guy who's pretty badly disfigured. Now, if you look at each individual image on the page, you'll notice that they're really not that different from one another. In fact, they're not even in what appears to be a chronological order. But because it appears to tell a story, and because we read from left to right, we're trying to find meaning in this sequence. And because you're trying to find meaning in the whole Gestalt principle of closed loops, you want to be able to understand the entirety of what's happening. You will keep gazing at it until you've understood what the meaning is, or you'll click through. So it's actually quite an effective ploy. This one's one of my favorites. So vacuum cleaners. Does anyone like cleaning their houses? No? Bit boring? Great example of how to take a boring item and make it fun. So on the left, we have cute, wrinkly Shar-Pei puppy. On the right, we have no more wrinkles. Wrinkles gone. And so this is basically saying, look, our vacuum cleaner is so strong, it will suck all the wrinkles off your puppy. Which actually sounds quite disgusting. But they've executed it pretty well without all the blood and gore. That happened, you know, they got rid of that bit. That was the middle phase, they ditched the middle. But the point is you're getting a contrast and concrete message before and after, A to B, etc. Bosh, job done. This is a very elegantly designed advert. So standard life investments. Anything relating to numbers, banking, investments is pretty abstract, right? Unless you're going to go out and buy that Maserati or whatever. What they've done is what their legal team probably didn't allow them to do with their copy. They've created a message which is extraordinarily tangible and compelling. So on the left, you've got a chunk of coal and the word potential, plain white background. On the right, delivered, opulent blue silk, and then a diamond. It's giving you that narrative without saying we're going to turn you from rags to riches. It's giving you that, archetypal story. And I think it's quite a powerful way of doing it. You also have to create a curiosity gap, and I talked a little bit about the Gestalt thing. This is the desire to close the loop. So I saw this recently. I was browsing BuzzFeed for the content of this video, of course, for this talk, and I found this, 24 things that Londoners can't stop talking about. Obviously, I was in London, they tracked my IP, they know where I am, and because I have this desire to see what's going on in London, in my hometown, of course I'm going to click on it, because if I don't, I'll miss out. Also this, how many of you were kids at some point? How many of you are adults now? Right, so things that kids do that would be creepy if an adult did them. Who's that going to apply to? Everyone, everyone. So you're going to try and create a loop, a closed loop for that curiosity gap. Finally, viral videos. So this is a fun bit. We heard earlier from Phil, actually, who mentioned Unruly Media, who do some amazing stuff in the video space. Things on finding out what psychological triggers will increase attention, engagement, memory, etc. And one of the things that's really good at doing this is the use of nostalgia. So this is the interactive bit. So I've got this video. I want you to tell me two things. Number one, do you think it's effective at inducing a sense of nostalgia? This will be sample specific because it will be for those of you who were born in the 80s. And number two, does it make you want to buy their product? And then if so, why? And if not, why not? Take a look.
You might not remember us, but we met in the 90s. We are members of Generation Y, as in yin yang, yo-yo. Life moved a little slower. Disks were square, desktop folders had personality. Extra storage space was just a zipper away. There was only one social network, but most of your friends died of dysentery. The only thing buzzing in your pocket was a pet, until that died too. But at least the troll was still a friend. Lunch was a puzzle, not a picture. You were pumping jams, water, shoes. You didn't have to worry about a news feed full of farm animals. You were busy feeding wild animals. A haircut didn't cost $60. It cost 4 minutes. You really had nothing to lose. Unless, of course, you were playing for keeps. The future was bright. You grew up. So did we.
Right. Hands up if you felt a sense of nostalgia to that. I always do when I watch that. Okay, so I think that's most of us. Right, hands up if you think that that was an effective way to make you want to buy their product. Hands up if that was a yes. A few of us. Hands up if that was a no. Why the no? Shout out to me, people. Oh, the wall of sound is amazing. I'm going to crowd surf any second. Okay, so I'm guessing that you probably sensed that there was a sense of nostalgia, but they coupled it badly. So the point here is that they put you in this beautiful scenario. You get this sense of nostalgia. Yes, I empathize. I remember this. I had trolls at school, blah, blah, blah. You get to the end point, and you are so convincingly in that state of nostalgia. They then put up their logo, and what do you think you associate with their brand? Nostalgia, which belongs in the past, right? So the point with any of these psychological principles is that you have to think about the end goal. So the end goal is meet the new Interact Explorer. Nothing about what you just experienced was new. Nothing. It was all old. It was all nostalgic. So what they should have done would have been to have nostalgia. This is where we're at now, sexy wiggle, and then finally, anticipation about the future. It's going to be amazing. Come join us. Go. But they didn't create that. They didn't use a curiosity gap. They didn't create anticipation or excitement or surprise. And so you're left in this nostalgia hump, which is why I would imagine it wouldn't have been that effective, among other things, obviously technical stuff aside. Okay, another way to engage people through videos and create a scenario in which it's more likely to go viral is to mirror your audience. So this is to do with things like lifestyle, to do with personality, where they live, what kind of stuff they do. And I found this one, which I really like, for jeans. Jeans are fairly boring. This advert is not quite as boring. little body romance. Very cute indeed. Right, so that's an example of mirroring your audience around the streets of New York. Okay, the other one, I'm really sorry, well, I'm totally not sorry about this. So you guys recently had Independence Day, which the Brits don't really care about at all, but you guys really do. And I found this video that kind of bridges our cultures a little bit. This is just to make you feel good on the last day, because I think you deserve it.
Oh, happy 4th of July, America. Ready to fire up the grill and celebrate our victory over the Brits? Well, I'm not. Because despite that incredibly convincing American accent, I'm one of those Brits. Now, I've acted in film and TV for years, but my greatest performance is acting like I don't care that every summer you gobble down tube sausages and celebrate kicking our arses, or butts, as you say, incorrectly. Do you really still have to celebrate your emancipation from us? I mean, that's like your girlfriend breaking up with you and then celebrating with fireworks every year for 300 years. It gets my goat. But what really gets my goat is imagining how great America would be if we were still in charge. Oh, America, if we'd won the war, you'd have better comedy, news, TV programs, and way better rude words. Oh, I'm talking fanny, trollop, minger, tar, minge bag, bleeding, sodding, blooming, cocked up, get stuffed, and of course, wanker. Imagine how sophisticated you'd sound when you're insulting someone. Oi, Brad, your wife's a slag! Now piss off, you wanker! See how classy that sounded? With our accents and your American self-confidence, you'd be unstoppable. Yeah, you'd have to pay a few more taxes, but you can't put a price on that. Great Britain, too, would be the greatest country on earth. Your lawyers would all wear powdered wigs, so criminals really respect them, and you'd have all the mushy peas you can stuff down your bloody great gobs. Oh, and if you get sick, you don't need to worry about medical insurance, because with the National Health Service, a doctor will see you for free in about 2 years. Plus, your taxes would be spent on things you really need, like a royal family who do the tough jobs no one else wants to do, like being driven around in a really nice car while waving. You'll want to eat some apple pie, then shoot some hoops and have a hoedown? F***ing bollocks.
This July 3rd, grab a Newcastle brown ale and toast to how great it could have been if we won.
If we won. Right, well, there you go. So making things funny. You can also surprise people with something a little bit unexpected. Chaps, I'm really sorry to put you through this, but this is an example of how plumbing or plumbing-related stuff can be surprising.
That's disgusting.
What?
Lock the door.
No, it's just a wee.
Why are you sitting down then?
I bet every single one of you chaps who ever sits down to wee whilst drunk or hungover will now get a soft closing loo seat off the back of that advert. Right, so the final one that I want to share with you, this is one of my favorites, mostly because it takes something really, really boring and it creates a narrative which is universally applicable, and it's a very, very moving advert for something which ordinarily you wouldn't relate to any kind of thing like life insurance. So, yeah, watch this.
난간을 좀 높게 해가지고 그래가지고 사람들이 올라가기 힘들게.
해가 지면 출입을 못하게 하는 게 낫지 않아요?
안전망을 설치하는 거예요.
But rather than trying to hinder people from taking their lives, we wanted to change their minds about it. A simple light is where our idea began. We wanted to light up each step as people walked by, surprise them, and bring them joy. We went to the bridge and walked on it to see for ourselves. We wanted to connect with people on eye level, so we started to create sensors that reacted to people as they walk by. We wanted this bridge of life to start a conversation with people. Sometimes with a simple greeting, or with words of wisdom, or with a silly joke that would move their hearts. And where the conversation ends, we set up bronze statues of two friends, where one is patting the other on his back and pinching his cheek.
마포대교가 최근 생명의 다리로 거듭나기 위해
다리가 다정하게 말을 거는 시
이렇게 내게 말을 거는 듯한 문구들로 극단적인 선택을 피할 수 있게 도와줍니다.
한정이라도 막을 수 있다면 엄청 좋을 것 같아요. 되게 공부했어요.
되게 재밌는 게요. 읽다 보면 되게 시간 가는 줄 몰라가지고.
A small first step by Samsung Life Insurance to save lives, to give a new hope, to share a new dream, to encourage and inspire. Even at this very moment, the bridge of life is speaking to someone. Human love, Samsung Life Insurance.
So what did you think of that? You felt pretty moved, right? At least a bit? Every time, I've seen this video countless times, and every time it says at the end, just go and see the person you miss, my heart just, it makes me upset. But it's a beautiful, beautiful way of creating wider meaning around their products for people that probably might not even ever use their product by accessing those universal emotional traits, or feelings, really. So, key takeaways, because I want to make sure there's time for a little bit of questions. If you want to create persuasive content, you have to make sure that you understand your audiences, that you engage them emotionally in any number of those ways that we've just seen or more, and that also you use psychological triggers. If you want to find out more about the references, there's a full list that you can check out. And I will now take your questions if you have them. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Natalie. Yeah, we are going to have time for a couple questions, so go to the microphones if you have one. So, talking about injecting emotion, using emotional engagement. So this sounds lighthearted, but I don't mean it to be. What if you work with a bunch of people, as many marketers do, who just are emotionally sheltered, not in touch with their emotions? How do we bring that out of each other?
You can get them to watch things that make them cry. I think it depends on what the goals are. So if you're working with people who are, like my dad's a physicist and works with physicists, and so does my brother, and you get people who are a bit more analytical, who perhaps have a different way of processing. And I think if that is your situation, then it's worth relating whatever story you're trying to create to things that have impacted them in their own personal lives. We all have feelings. Even psychopaths have feelings, even though they're not empathetic. So if you can relate whatever the empathy or emotion is that you're trying to create in your process to something that speaks to them personally about their own experience, that tends to be quite an effective way.
Yeah. Yes. Oh.
Can we get
No. Okay. Ooh.
Hello.
Hey, thanks so much. That was really interesting. I've noticed, especially in headlines, that a lot of those words that you had on the slide have been around for a long time. They don't seem to change. But I was wondering if you have any opinions about you'll never guess what happened next. I see that and I just won't click anymore because it's so prolific, but I also know that marketers aren't the general population, so I was wondering if you think that that's going to stop working.
Such a good question. So it depends on how you deploy that particular principle. Essentially, what you see with any kind of psychology is that if you have an understanding of the person or the people you're trying to reach, that always will stay the same. The underlying motivating factors don't change. It's just the way in which you deploy them that do. So, for instance, to your point, yes, I often won't, because I know what's going on, but there are other ways of doing it. So, for instance, VHX, a video platform over in New York, did this thing where they had a YouTube channel, or there's a client of theirs that had this, and they wanted to create a series, and so they gave 7 episodes away for free, and then the last episode was, well, you're gonna have to pay $3 to see what happens. And because they had such a big viewership, they used that principle in a way that was kind of ethical because they're given so much value, they got that buy-in, and then people did want to know what happened next. So I think it's a question of always testing how you're going to deploy that technique. So the mechanism will change, but the underlying motivation won't. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Thank you.
These are conversations we have all the time. We have them at Moz when we're testing headlines and implementing content. You know, is this too clickbaity? Are we deceiving our audience? And Rand always says, you know, is it empathetic towards the audience? And that sort of helps us out. Yes, go ahead.
What do you do if your industry is boring and your content is mostly behind a paywall, what people want to see?
So the goal there would be to get them to go behind the paywall. Yes. Well, if most of your content is behind the paywall, then they're not going to know what content they're missing out on. So one of the biggest ways in which to get people to connect with you is through reciprocity. If you don't give them enough, and there'll be a sweet point for each industry or for each site. So you have to find that sweet point. And if you're not giving stuff away so they don't feel like they're building a relationship with you and they don't know what to expect, then whatever links you use, it will be viewed more clickbaity, especially if it's an industry which doesn't usually do that kind of stuff. So I'd give more content away, try some of these principles, and then also get feedback about what people value. Or maybe even do a series of posts, and then the final one, which is the synopsis with all the references and the research, that one that's high value, get people to get that from behind the paywall.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Fascinating stuff. If people want to learn more about website psychology, what is the best way to do that?
So I've created some goodies for you guys, which has all these slides and then a free chapter from my book and some other things. You can go to bit.ly/mozgoodies. I've also tweeted about it, and then Institute of Web Psychology, where I run courses on the subject, and there's a free course on there at the moment if you fancy trying it out. That's it. Yeah,
I think we're going to tweet that link out cool. to those links. Nathalie Nahai, thank you so much. Thanks. You did awesome.